Where did they live? The latest in my series where I take a look at key figures from the Third Reich dictatorship and see what's left, if anything, of their houses. Where did they live? And of course, talk about these figures a little bit. Today, I'm in the Berlin district of Schmargendorf, which is incredibly pretty and very, very wealthy. I've got mansion envy again. Living in a mansion next to a park backing onto a forest would be ideal for me. So if you've got a spare one and you'd like to give it to me, do let me know. Of course, it's places like this where people who are high up and powerful live in any regime, be they a corrupt fascist dictatorship or a democracy like we live in today. The federal president actually lives just around the corner over here. The place is very clearly marked on Google Maps, and that's his official presidential home. So he has an official home for show in the middle of town in the Tiergarten there, but yeah, this is where he lives. And yeah, it's a house that was kind of forcefully sold by Jews in the 1930s. It shows you a lot about Germany that is on a sign outside the front of the building, right? That this is not hidden. Anyways, let's get on to the topic of today's video, which is the most famous, most infamous movie director of the Third Reich era, Leni Riefenstahl. Riefenstahl was born in Berlin, was into the arts in her early years. She did not live around here at the beginning. She lived in a working class district up in Wedding. Apparently the family did have a little bit of money though, I guess, which is good if you want to get into interpretive dance, which is what she did in the early 1920s. At one point she danced alongside a woman named Anita Berber. There's hopefully a link floating up around here. We did a podcast on Anita Berber. It's one of our more entertaining episodes in my opinion. Absolutely mad Anita Berber. You definitely need to find out more about her. Not a very likable figure, but I think perhaps not as bad as Riefenstahl. Riefenstahl was a dancer until she had a knee injury, and yeah, she couldn't dance anymore, but she wasn't completely immobile. She got therefore into movies and became an actress, appeared in a couple of Bergfilme, mountain films, where she portrayed a strong woman climbing a mountain. This did not make her particularly famous or well known, but if you're into strong women climbing mountains, I'm sure these are great movies. So yeah, that's how she got into movies, and then in the early 30s, she's able to co-write and direct her first movie called The Blue Light, and it does okay. It catches the eye of a certain wannabe artist, upstart politician, Adolf Hitler. And well, she finds out that he's a fan of it also, I'm not really sure, but she certainly invites him to come and meet, and yeah, in 1932 they meet for the first time, and after this, I guess you could argue that she becomes Hitler's personal private filmmaker, certainly to an extent. He actually commissions her to make a movie about the Nazi Party day of 1933. This is really just the beginning of her story. I want to talk about this, the movies that she made in this period, and then get into what happened after 1945 as well. She's one of those people who, changes career for sure, and also tries to distance herself from her involvement in the regime. Anyway, I've actually just walked past her house. It was around the corner. I'm not going to stand and yap in front of it, but I am going to stop doing this, go get some B-roll, and then see you again when I'm home in my office and go through the story of Leni Riefenstahl. Okay, actually, I've walked around here a little bit. I've been skulking. No police have showed up so far. So I think I may as well talk about her house a little bit because, boom, so look, it's still here. Isn't that weird? It's still here. I mean, not weird that something would survive World War II, of course, but kind of weird that not only does it look unchanged, there's a couple of boots outside the front door there. I mean, it's well lived in. People live there today, and I don't know, it feels odd. Don't think I'd like to buy Leni Riefenstahl's house or live in Leni Riefenstahl's house. And I mean, that's what they did. It's built for her. It took 2 years to build in the middle of the 1930s. She moves in 1937, and yeah, Goebbels and Hitler come to celebrate and kind of warm her new home. She has a party with them in the garden. I'm not sure if they came at the same time, but still. Odd, right? I don't know. Easy to judge, of course. If you're a raving communist or if you're Jewish, maybe it's quite cool. Say, yeah, I took that from them, But yeah, either way, I do find it one of the more strange ones, one of the more obviously lived in ones, and one that doesn't have a sign outside the front. It's not a memorial protected building. There's no information that says who used to live here, what they did. I mean, what they did, she worked on Olympia while she was living here, probably worked on it inside of the house as well. And yeah, started to work on her next film there, which was also, incredibly problematic in a much more obvious way than Olympia was, even, in my opinion. So yeah, anyways, that's Leni Riefenstahl's house, still there. Number 30 Heydenstrasse. That'll be down below as well, if you want to come be a nerd like me. And so in 1933, Hitler comes to power, and he very soon turns to Riefenstahl and basically tries to ask her to help him mythologize the new regime on film, turn it into something that people can understand, something that's digestible. Hitler viewed Riefenstahl as an artist that was uniquely suited to taking the Nazi pageantry, the uniforms, the marches, and turning them into a really grand cinematic spectacle. And so that year he invited her to the Nazi Party rally at Nuremberg. And according to her memoirs, initially she was like, oh no, I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to make a Nazi propaganda film. Of course, she lived to tell the tale. She could say what she wants. According to her, Hitler pleaded with her. He offered her unlimited resources, full artistic control. He said to her, he flattered her. She's the only person that could take what other people would turn into a newsreel, and she could turn it into a work of art. And so, you know how it goes. Of course she says yes, and she makes a film called Sieg des Glaubens, Victory of Faith. And it's a hit. With the Nazis, that is. It premieres here in Berlin in December. Hitler's there with his minions and cronies, and who features prominently in the film? One of his cronies, Ernst Röhm. This will very soon be a problem because Röhm will very quickly fall out of favor with Hitler. He will be deemed a traitor, and in the summer of 1934, he will be executed. So this film, good as it was no good. Hitler needed a second film, a bigger, better sequel, and that's what he got next year with Triumph of the Will. This is the one that, even though you maybe don't know it, you definitely have heard of. You've seen pictures from it. So the sequel was filmed at next year's rally, 1934. Again, Riefenstahl's given carte blanche, but now she's got a lot more experience. She puts on a massive production, and importantly, she has control of the production. It's not in the hands of the propaganda ministry. This is how films were made in Nazi Germany. It was Goebbels that had the power, Goebbels that made sure that everything fit the Nazi message. Riefenstahl, she was separate. She was somehow special in the eyes of Adolf Hitler. Triumph of the Will was unlike any propaganda film that had ever come before. Riefenstahl's aesthetic choices, her use of technical innovations, turned the rally into a film that really is still impressive today. She used soaring aerial shots, she used sweeping camera movement, she used dramatic lighting, and she edited it to deify Hitler and the Nazi movement. The film presents the 1934 rally as a religious spectacle with Hitler descending from the skies and vast ranks of uniformed soldiers all standing in order admiring him. Triumph of the Will, of course, went on to win awards in Germany, that's no surprise, but it did win awards in other countries as well, including at the Venice Film Festival. Even today, in cinematic terms, it is regarded as something of a masterpiece of technique. Not of content, clearly. This means that this film forever linked Leni Riefenstahl to Adolf Hitler, to the Nazis. I forgot to do a subscriber plug when I was out and about. Hey, you like this stuff? Subscribe, because if I get subscribers, I can make some cash and I can make more of these, because getting one of them out a week at the moment is pretty tough, but I like doing it and it's had a really good response so far. So if you like this stuff, if you want to see more of it, hit subscribe. It helps me out massively. Cheers. I mentioned Joseph Goebbels a couple of times, and it's important to look at the relationship between these two because it must have been rather fraught. These are both people who were ambitious, eager to elbow one another out the way, people who really admired Hitler and wanted all of his attention. There must have been jealousy between them, but again, Riefenstahl's the one who lives, who gets to tell her story. Goebbels wrote a lot in his diaries, initially supporting her in 1933, but yeah, Riefenstahl would say that he was incredibly jealous of her, that he was at one point on his knees begging to get into her pants and she had to rebuff him. Whether or not that's true, whether or not she's exaggerating, it's hard to say, but I would imagine that the essence of it is true. Adolf Hitler was very good at pitting two people against one another, making them fight for his affection, for his attention, and to kind of spur them on. Goebbels would certainly have been jealous of the special attention that Riefenstahl got, and this was none more apparent than the special attention she would receive when making her next film, Olympia. And so, of course, in 1936, Berlin hosts the Summer Olympic Games. It's seen really as a showcase for the Nazis, for them to show their regime off to the world. They've got a world stage. And so again, Hitler commissions Riefenstahl, and she's going to make the official film of the Olympics. Not just a broadcast, but something that's going to last forever. And so she assembles a team of over 100 technicians, including 45 cameramen. She was granted a massive budget, 2.8 million Reichsmarks. And to conceal the fact that this is what they were doing, the Nazis actually, they set up a kind of fake company called Olympia Film that really only on paper had Riefenstahl and her brother Heinz in control. Over the 2 weeks of the games, Riefenstahl and her crew shot more than 1.3 million feet of film, over 400,000 meters. They captured athletes from every conceivable angle. Riefenstahl even pioneered groundbreaking, brand new techniques for Olympia. She had camera towers built and pits in the stadium so she could shoot from below. She used slow motion, she used extreme close-ups. She really showed off the athletic form. She even used airborne and underwater cameras, and at one point she had a custom track built so that the camera could move alongside sprinters as they were running to really capture the action, to make the viewer feel like they are there in the stadium. These are the kind of shots that really nobody had ever done before. It shows you that despite the awful person that she was, Riefenstahl, you cannot doubt, was incredibly talented. We should also mention, though, or I should also mention, that this talent really got in the way of the spectators. We're talking camera crews, giant lenses in the way of people, shouting over the action, people yelling at her. By all accounts, her presence actually at the games was something of a mess, but I guess it shows you the Nazi dedication to propaganda, that spoiling the show for a little bit on the day wouldn't matter if they had a great film to show off at the end of it. The resulting film was over 3 hours long, and it came out 18 months after the games were finished, just in time for Adolf Hitler's 49th birthday. Domestically, it was a huge hit. It more than made its money back in the first week. It took in more than 4 million Reichsmarks, and Riefenstahl, importantly, did not shy away from showing off the real star of the 1936 games, the black American athlete Jesse Owens. Owens, who won more gold medals than anyone else at the games, proved that racial ideologies of the Nazis were simply fiction. He proved this by his very being. The fact that he was also popular with locals, with German athletes, and with the German press was the source of great annoyance for Adolf Hitler and his friends. It was supposed to be their chance to show off the so-called superiority of the Aryan race, but all that anyone could talk about was a black man, was Jesse Owens. By 1938, with the release of Olympia, Riefenstahl was at the peak of her career. Olympia confirmed her status as Nazi Germany's most renowned filmmaker and a global figure in cinema. But this was really the beginning of the end. This is where, for Riefenstahl, the cracks would start to appear. With Olympia a huge success, Riefenstahl sets off for New York to promote the film with disastrous timing. She's in New York on the 9th of November 1938, the Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, this night of anti-Semitic violence that the Nazis unleash across Germany. Of course, in the eyes of the Americans, Riefenstahl is the embodiment of Hitler and Nazism. Nobody wants to go and see Olympia. Screenings are cancelled, and Riefenstahl, who presumably had been wanting to get over to California and impress the people in Hollywood, is shunned. Her career would never recover from this moment. In fact, she would head home and start to work on her next picture, a movie called Tiefland, or Lowlands. This was a drama that was going to be set in the Pyrenees, in the mountains. Again, one of her mountain films that she'd made in the 1920s, essentially with her as the star. And so she starts to make the movie in World War II, during the Second World War. So resources are of course scarce, but the Nazis aren't afraid to help her out. They supply her with extras from a concentration camp. These are Sinti and Roma people that were labeled as gypsies. They played peasants in villages in the mountains. It's thought that once their scenes were done, they were sent off to Auschwitz and killed, although that has never actually fully been confirmed. It's certainly possible, but from what I can see, it's not an outright fact. Amazingly, Tiefland was actually finished. It came out in 1954, and I think it's fair to say that it was a flop and that audiences were somewhat underwhelmed. Not many people wanted to go and see a Riefenstahl film in 1954, to say the very least. It also is a sign that however talented she may have been behind her camera, you can't sometimes separate the art and the artist. Her career was really over. But she would go on to try and reinvent herself. After Germany's defeat in 1945, Riefenstahl was detained and put through Denazification tribunals. One of Hitler's most famous collaborators had to come face to face with the idea of accountability. Riefenstahl, though, was able to convince the courts that she was just an artist. She was caught up in all of this and she didn't know what was going on. And so she was labeled a Mitläufer, a fellow traveler, someone who just went along with it. As a result, she evaded any serious punishment. One key fact that seriously helped her plead her case was that actually she was never a member of the Nazi Party. She never signed up. This certainly helped her in the courtroom, but did not help her in the court of public opinion. This was a woman who had dined with Goebbels, who was admired by Hitler, had them both invited to her home, the one from 1937. And I mean, who could that be but a Nazi? She was never forgiven by the public. Riefenstahl, for her part, was either unwilling to face up to what she'd done or unable to. She famously declared that she could not believe that Hitler would be responsible for the Holocaust. In interviews, she acted shocked when people brought up things like the final solution, as if she'd never heard of them before. To the end of her days, she portrayed herself as entirely naive about politics. She was just a passionate filmmaker who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. She maintained that her Nazi-era films were just documentaries, that they weren't propaganda. Riefenstahl would go on to try and reinvent herself as a photographer in the latter half of the 20th century, but of course she could never shake the association as, well, Adolf Hitler's favorite filmmaker. More recently, there was a documentary, actually in 2024, just simply named Riefenstahl, and that was directed by Andreas Weil. It delves into Riefenstahl a bit deeper than anyone ever has before because he was able to access materials that were previously locked away in archives. This includes letters, recordings, and even unreleased film footage. The film certainly challenges her ideas of political naivety. He was able to uncover evidence that she had witnessed a massacre of Polish civilians in the early days of World War II. And as a result, there's no way that she could have been ignorant of what the Nazis really stood for, of what they were really doing. Her house in Berlin is still there. There's no sign outside of it. There's nothing that marks it. People live in it. I have to say, I do find that a little bit strange. And I'm not normally critical of Berlin for this kind of thing because this city is probably the best in the world when it comes to having a historical sign somewhere. But if you were to head there to Heydenstrasse 30, you would never know. And I think that that's a great shame because when we think about the Nazis, propaganda has to be at the forefront of it. It's one of the things that they were very good at, that they were very effective at. There's a lot to learn from that. And Triumph of the Will and Olympia, those are the things that show us what the Nazis stood for. Those are the things that, in a way, have had some of the longest tail. So, that was the latest in the series of Where They Lived. New name, new branding, because apparently if you say certain words, you can't monetize videos. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, stick around for the next one. Ciao!